Good afternoon. This is Colleen Cox, and Abuse Education Coordinator. Thanks everybody for joining us today for this webinar about the new Elder Rights Project. With that, I will go ahead and introduce our presenter, Nicole Zimmer. And I'm just advancing to the next slide. So welcome, Nicole, and I'll let you say a little bit more about yourself and the Elder Rights Project, which of course this webinar is all about.
Great. Thank you so much, Colleen. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to you all. I am the project director of the Elder Rights Project, which is a brand new program that provides free attorneys for elder abuse victims throughout the state of Wisconsin. This program just started in October, so we are brand new. We're up and running. We are fully staffed at this point, and we are ready to take some cases. So I really appreciate the opportunity to get the word out. During this webinar, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what the Elder Rights Project is, what the basic eligibility requirements are, what are some of the different types of services that we can provide to people who are eligible for the project, how you get clients to us, our referral process, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. So jumping right in, the Elder Rights Project is a collaboration of Legal Action of Wisconsin and Wisconsin Judicare. Legal Action of Wisconsin is a nonprofit law firm. It's been around since 1968, and it provides free civil legal aid to basically the lower half of the state of Wisconsin. You can see my little icon there, which shows all the counties that Legal Action of Wisconsin serves. It's the southern 39 counties in Wisconsin. So we provide free lawyers to people who are low income, typically. Wisconsin Judicare, similarly, is a nonprofit law firm that serves the northern part of Wisconsin, so the northern 33 counties and also the 11 Indian tribes of Wisconsin. Wisconsin Judicare has been around since 1966, and it does really the same work as Legal Action of Wisconsin, provides free civil legal services to usually low-income residents. So now we have our first poll question, and I am curious to know for everyone out there whether or not you've referred someone to either Legal Action or to Wisconsin Judicare for free legal help, and what type of legal help you referred them for. Was it a restraining order, a family law matter, housing, consumer, public benefits, or employment? Or if you've never made a referral, we'd like to know that too. So if everybody could take a minute and just respond to that poll. I'll just give another couple seconds. All right, so it looks like quite a few referrals have been made for family law matters, and then also for restraining orders, and then a little bit for housing, public benefits, not so much for consumer employment, and then there's a few people who had not made a referral yet. So the exciting thing about the Elder Rights Project, as we'll talk about in more detail in a minute, is that it's very broad in the services that we can provide. So not just family law matters, not just restraining orders, but a lot of different things. All right, so this is kind of the mission statement of the Elder Rights Project. We provide free legal assistance to secure safety, stability, and independence for elder abuse victims. The funding for this project comes through VOCA, and I'm sure many of you out there also get some funding from VOCA, so you may already know this, but VOCA is the Victim of Crime Act, came out in 1984, and the cool thing about VOCA is that it's not tax dollars, it's not taxpayer funded, it's actually funded through fines and penalties that federal criminals have to pay. So when someone is convicted of a federal crime and they have to pay any sort of a fine or a fee, that goes into a bucket that then gets handed out to help victims of crime. The goals of VOCA funding are very broad. It's to respond to the physical and emotional needs of victims, assist victims in stabilizing their lives after victimization, assist victims in understanding and participating in the criminal justice system, and then provide victims with a measure of safety. So I've got another quick poll question here. The poll question is, do you have to be low income to receive free legal help from the Elder Rights Project? And state whether that is true or false. All right, so the results are pretty evenly split, but in fact, the answer is that it's false. You do not have to be low income to receive legal help from the Elder Rights Project. And so this is something that we like to point out early on and often because it's something that's different from a lot of the other projects at Legal Action of Wisconsin and Wisconsin Judicare. So you remember in the beginning I said that we provide free civil legal aid to typically low-income Wisconsin residents. The Elder Rights Project is one exception where we can provide services regardless of whether that person is low income or not. So what are the eligibility criteria? In order to get services from the Elder Rights Project, you need to be a Wisconsin resident. You need to be 60 or older. You need to be a victim of crime, the crime being elder abuse, and then have a civil legal need related to the victimization. That's it, those four things. Wisconsin resident, 60, victim of crime, and you need legal help. So not included in that, no income or asset limits. You can have any income and any amount of assets and still receive services. And importantly, the victimization just needs to be self-reported by the victim. They don't need to have reported it to the police. There don't need to be any criminal charges or convictions. So if that person believes that they're a victim of a crime, that's sufficient. What types of crimes do we see most often? Intimate partner violence, certainly, that your basic, domestic abuse, domestic violence situation. Stalking, harassment is another common one. Financial exploitation is a very, very common crime with this population that we see here in Milwaukee. And I should say actually as a little bit of background, so the Elder Rights Project as it exists today just started in October of 2016. But it had been around just in Milwaukee County for about the past 20 years. So this is a project operating strictly in Milwaukee County that we've now expanded statewide. So we do have some experience in representing these people in Milwaukee. And what we've seen through that is that financial exploitation is extremely common. And we'll talk in a minute about what I mean exactly by financial exploitation. Other common crimes, neglect I mentioned, and then abuse. Physical abuse, sexual abuse, and importantly also emotional abuse. So emotional abuse is a category of elder abuse under Wisconsin law. It's part of our statutes. 4690 defines emotional abuse as language or behavior that serves no legitimate purpose and is intended to be intimidating, humiliating, threatening, frightening, or otherwise harassing, and that does or reasonably could intimidate, humiliate, threaten, frighten, or otherwise harass the individual. So this is a broad definition, and it includes things like name calling and other things that, in your typical domestic violence situation, if you're looking at getting a domestic abuse injunction, for example, wouldn't necessarily qualify. It wouldn't be grounds for a domestic abuse injunction. But it is included as elder abuse and is grounds for an individual at risk injunction. So I mention this just to point out kind of some of the differences between domestic abuse and elder abuse, and to encourage everyone to really think broadly anytime they see a victim who's 60 or older and they're wondering, would this person be eligible for the Elder Rights Project? If they're subject to emotional abuse, they most certainly would be. The other common thing that we see that I want to talk about is financial exploitation, and this is also very broadly defined. So someone is financially exploited if someone has obtained or received for less than fair market value their money, property, or belongings. And this can happen by deception. So if somebody lied to them and that resulted in obtaining their money. Coercion. They were unduly influenced into giving something away. Or force. We also see it occur very often with abuse of a financial authority, such as a power of attorney for finances, a guardian of the estate, etc. So a person that they know and trust that they've allowed to help manage their money is now stealing their money. And then identity theft is another big example that we see quite often. And the last example I have there is forgery. Forgery on things like checks, titles to vehicles, titles to property, etc. So what can the Elder Rights Project do to help these victims? The services we can provide are pretty vast. It goes well beyond, family court matters or injunctions. So I want to go through the list here and kind of talk a little bit more about some of the things that we can do. First and foremost, one of the goals of VOCA is to keep people safe, and so we do represent in injunctions, domestic abuse injunctions, and also individual at-risk injunctions. One of the things our attorneys can do is actually, sit down with an advocate and a client and help determine which type of a restraining order might be appropriate in a particular situation. I also wanted to give some actual case examples of each of these different areas. So as I said, this project has been going on in Milwaukee for quite some time. So these examples are from work that we've done with elder abuse victims in Milwaukee. For example, we had an 84-year-old woman come to us who lived with her adult sons, both of whom were developmentally disabled. No one in the household was able to drive, so they relied on taxis to get around. One of their regular taxi drivers kind of befriended himself with the family, convinced them to hire him as their personal driver. So he was around them all the time, the only one who drove them anywhere, and eventually convinced them to hire him as a caregiver for the sons. So he was getting paid through a government program to provide care for the sons. He was getting paid to drive them around. And eventually he said, why don't you allow me to help you pay your bills as well? Over the course of 2 years, this man stole $52,000 from the client's bank account, cashed out her life insurance policy, opened several credit cards in her name, and ran up about $18,000 in unauthorized charges. In that case, we filed for an individual at risk injunction against him. He was represented by an attorney, and the victim was actually unable to come to court and testify because she had some health issues that had put her in the hospital at that point. But we were able to get testimony from a niece of hers and from an Adult Protective Services investigator, and the court granted the injunction. In addition to the injunction, we also placed a fraud alert on her credit report, had referred the case to the police department for a criminal investigation, and we're planning to file a civil suit to try to get some of that money back when unfortunately the victim passed away. So that's one of our examples of things, in terms of injunctions that we can do. In addition to injunctions, we also do a lot of housing work. So if there's an abusive person in the home, we can file an eviction to remove that person from the home. In certain situations, a victim may not want to do a restraining order, and so we may do an eviction to remove someone. Or if the victim is actually subject to an eviction, we may be able to defend them if the eviction is related to their victimization, their abuse or neglect. I can give another example from the Milwaukee project. A 76-year-old man was befriended by a woman who lived down the hall from him in an apartment. In the course of a few months, she had taken $40,000 from his bank account. They then actually got married, and she moved in with him. She then proceeded to isolate him from his children. They didn't know where he was living or even that he had gotten married. Shortly after the marriage occurred, then she actually started physically abusing him as well. She had hit him, held him at knife point, would confine him to the basement, and was taking him around to different doctors in an attempt to get him declared incapacitated. We obtained an injunction in that case, but then we also negotiated a termination of his lease without penalty so that he could move to a safe location. Another example of work that we can do is to review the conduct of powers of attorney and actually revoke abusive power of attorney agents. We can do foreclosure defense when the foreclosure is a result of financial exploitation or predatory lending. And I mentioned before, identity theft is very common. So in cases of identity theft, we can remove unauthorized charges from accounts, put fraud alerts on credit reports, block fraudulent debts from credit reports, and if it gets to the point where the creditor is actually suing the victim, we can defend them in debt collection lawsuits. I'll give you one more case example that has to do with identity theft. We helped a 62-year-old woman who suffered from MS after her paid caregiver had stolen her identity. This woman had opened 6 new credit card accounts in our client's name and placed unauthorized charges on 4 existing accounts. We shared the information of our investigation with the local police, and that did result in a conviction of the caregiver. We also disputed the debts and cleared over $4,000 of charges. We helped the woman get a money manager, so she had someone in place who could help her with her bills, who wasn't going to steal from her. And then all of this identity theft had led to her not being able to pay her mortgage, so she was in danger of a foreclosure. We helped her get a loan modification, which reduced her monthly payment by about $700 a month. She was able to keep her house, which she had about $60,000 of equity in. And then we also got her some public benefits that she was eligible for, which leads to the next one, benefit checkups and assistance obtaining public benefits needed as a result of the abuse. Oftentimes abusers are providing some cares in the home, and once you remove that abuser, you need something or someone to come in and do those services for the victim. So we can do that as well. And then the last example is small and large claim civil actions for the return of money and property, including real property wrongfully taken from the elder person. And I'll give one final example. We helped a 77-year-old woman. Her daughter had moved in with her to be her caretaker, Instead of providing care, however, the daughter withheld medication, didn't feed the client properly, physically restrained her, and convinced the older person to add the daughter to the title of her home. Oh, and she also used some credit cards without permission. So we, in that case, we were able to do three things for this victim. We got an individual at risk injunction. We disputed the unauthorized credit card debt and wiped out $17,000 of debt. And then we filed an action in large claims court to remove the abuser's name from title to the home. So my point in giving all of these examples is to just really encourage you to think broadly about the help that we can provide, and to know that it goes beyond restraining orders and beyond family court actions. And we take those goals of the VOCA project seriously, and we see our role as stabilizing the victim's life following victimization, whatever that may be, whatever they may need. All right, so I have another poll question here. Is it true or false you must cooperate with law enforcement to receive free legal help from the Elder Rights Project? Is that true or false? False. Everybody got that one right. Absolutely. Yeah, you do not need to cooperate with law enforcement to get our services. Awesome. All right, there are a few limits on what we can do, and I'll just mention these really briefly. We can't do personal injury cases, so we can't sue abusers for pain and suffering, that type of thing. We can't do any sort of criminal work. We don't do workers' comp, employment discrimination, immigration issues, although we can help with U visas and things like that, but not beyond that. No school desegregation and no abortion issues, and those are funding restrictions we have from some other funding sources that we get. All right, if you're not sure whether the Elder Rights Project can help, I really encourage you to call me, and I have my direct line there. That's my direct office phone, and I'm happy to talk through whether you think a referral is appropriate. But please err on the side of caution. If you're not sure whether the referral is appropriate or not, just send it over and we'll be happy to figure it out. So how to make referrals. There's two different options. The first option is to fill out the referral form that should have been sent to you in your reminder of the webinar. There was an option to download it. So you can use that referral form and then fax it or email it to the appropriate place, and on the last page of the referral form we sort of show which ones go to legal action and which ones go to Judicare. If you don't want to use the referral form, then you can just pass along our intake line to the potential client. I have the intake number listed there. The client does need to call in that intake line directly. We do need to speak directly with the client or with somebody who has the authority to retain us on their behalf, like a power of attorney or a guardian. The intake line is answered live Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 4. And I've got another slide just showing the intake line.
So this concludes the presentation about the Elder Rights Project and the recording on January 11th, 2017. Again, thanks for joining us today.